Dallas is probably gonna ask good. So man, I like told all of them, I was like, it's in the freaking what happened? Yeah.
What's the delay? Delay's about 30 seconds or so?
Yeah, should be good. It's good. Oh, here it's live because it's connected straight to the camera. Oh, okay. Yeah, cool. Yeah, Wizards can do a lot of things. Yeah, I guess I gotta fight there. You're a wizard.
Yeah, give me a type of wizard.
Why can't I just be both, Aaron?
Yeah, I probably want to be
You're different.
You're telling me.
Is it red, white? Is it red, yellow, and black, or is it black, yellow, and red?
The brown good. Have tried the salad. Pickle tastes like pickles. I thought it might be.
Technically, Harry can make himself very well.
No, I read.
Yeah, if we add okay, we'll put Johnny 5.
Yeah.
See, maybe. Don't forget who I am. You were on a whole month and I didn't see you. Yeah, I am a shadow of a person. Oh, they've already done it. Yeah.
Really do anything for yourself.
No way.
Now this is
This is
I've got 38.
In fact, the other boys, they just go about their day. They don't like looking at it. Yeah. You're learning so much. It was pretty good cookie. I was gonna get crunchy, but the chocolate is just great.
It also depends on how low I shave it. So like for instance, the first thing that starts to bother me is the hair of the lip will start chewing.
Yeah.
So I'll do like a lip shave, you know, once a week.
I didn't go to the one because I had to go.
Yeah.
Julie's great. But yeah, like straight graduation to being on a side or side
Flip a little bit. Yeah, I almost always roll it back like, into my mouth and then end up chewing on it.
so you went for options basically even during the power. What was the highlight? In my ear. So you're like, whoa, Michael. People are all about the fireworks and everything. They're like, love the darkness. Like that's what people are saying. They're like, you have to go see like fireworks. It's like, well, I can't see fireworks. And then I was moving out in West Campus. So I was like, oh, fireworks, I guess. As in like, shut the box and back and forth. You go to any like unofficial graduations? I went to Latinx grad as an audience at the same party. I was like, that's awesome. Well, you know, it's kind of like dumb being
Yeah, I'm like the
or whatever the number is for college. Yeah, it was capped to like 6 people, so like I got a ticket, 7 people off it because I wanted to
Good.
they just looked us up. I was not as bad. It's great, I love it.
You can only go up. You got a great graphic, you got your own university. Like,
Yeah, we do need a theme song.
oh my goodness. That would be so cool. I'm excited for the knowledge. It's gonna be a good day. Yeah.
All right, you guys ready to get started? Well, don't clap yet. I haven't taught you anything yet. I'll just tell the title, like, let's set the expectations down here a little bit. Hey, Arich, can you hear me in the back okay through the speakers? Come up a little. Yep. All right, let's see how that is. A little better? You can hear me all right? Okay. Hello to Dallas. Dallas crew, welcome. All right, so welcome to Managing Your Career. Tyler and someone on, who created the graphic? Who was the designer on that? Huh? You were? Thank you. GordonU goes back, I don't know, a few years ago, the Venture Associates asked if I would do some lectures and workshops on various topics related to capitalization and fundraising and whatnot, and we jokingly called it GordonU, and so now GordonU kind of looks official. But anyway, this topic is managing your career. This is a collection of my personal cheat notes on this topic, having spent 32 years as either an employee, a manager, an executive, and for about 10 years, 12 years, being kind of a career coach to my three girls. My girls are 23 to 31, I think. Yeah, 23 to 31. So I've kind of been a career coach. So I have these kind of cheat notes that I decided for this, well, why not just put it in presentation format? Fair enough? So it's around managing your career. And at the end I have about maybe half dozen slides on managing your financial career. So there's kind of your professional career, and then a little bit about, a lot of this goes into kind of your financial career, so I thought I'd share a few thoughts on that. So since we're talking about career, I thought I'd ask if anybody has an opinion on the difference between a career and a job. Are they the same thing? Anybody have any thoughts?
No.
What's the difference?
No, not the same thing.
Not the same thing. To me, there might be, I'm sure there's articles on this. To me, a career is long-term and it's a journey and it's an evolution, whereas a job is about a paycheck. Of course, your career is likely made up of multiple jobs, but when I think career, I'm thinking about on a path, and I'm going somewhere, whether I arrive there or not. I'm kind of thinking, I'm thinking longer term, I'm thinking journey, I'm thinking evolution of me as an individual and the skills I develop, whereas when I think about job, I think about how much is going to show up in my paycheck every 2 weeks kind of thing. Okay? So I'm talking about managing your career, not managing your job. There are certain things you should be doing or shouldn't be doing as it relates to your job that will help you manage your career. Make sense? And I'm going to pause at the end of the managing your career part. I'm going to pause. I'm going to suggest some homework assignments, and then just open up for a lot of questions. So it's okay if you have a question, in between, but just know that I'm going to pause before we move to the managing your financial career. All right, so who's responsible for managing your career? You've got a manager. Your manager probably has a manager. Eventually, your manager reports to me or Josh or Rick. Which of us is responsible for managing your career?
Yourself.
Yeah, you manage your career. Your manager and your manager's manager should be helpful, but you are responsible for managing your career. I'm going to try and sprinkle in a couple personal stories because I've learned a few things along the way. I've made a lot of mistakes, and I'd like you to benefit from them. One of them is my IBM story. You'll hear me tell a couple of IBM stories, and probably that's because it was early in my career. When I graduated with a computer science degree, I went to work for IBM in sales. I was an enterprise sales rep in Corpus Christi. And let's see, I graduated when I was 21, so I started at IBM when I was 21. And I worked, well, I was at IBM for 8 years, but after about 3 years, it was either one of the senior level colleagues of mine in the branch, the sales branch, or it might have been my manager. I can't remember who asked me this question. But I had done pretty well in my first 2 or 3 years, and somebody says, hey, so, how do you think you get promoted here at IBM? Like, oh, good question. And I think my answer was something along the lines of, well, I'm in a sales role, so probably if I make my quota more years than I don't make my quota, somebody's going to notice that, hey, that guy Gordon, he's a pretty good sales rep, and if some years I can be like 150 or 200% of quota, surely that's going to stand out, and I'm going to get tapped on the shoulder, and they're going to promote me. And I kind of got this look of, oh, Gordon, I remember when I was only 23 years old too, and you're being a little naive. And the lecture I got was, dude, you don't just sit around and do a great job and somebody taps you on the shoulder and you get promoted. It can happen, but no, you have to take responsibility for managing your career. I'm like, oh, what does that mean? And then part of what I learned is part of what I'm going to describe to you here. So that's what I'm saying is, like, I think you should have a majority responsibility for managing your career, because remember, career is long-term, career is evolution, career is journey. Your manager is mostly responsible for overseeing you and nurturing you in your job. Many managers can take on kind of career coach, career mentors and kind of help you with that longer evolution as well. This is why you need to accept the responsibility, because your career is going to span many managers. I was at IBM for 8 years, had 8 managers at IBM, All right, so that's my IBM story, and that's what I looked like when I was 23 years old. Huh? I had 5 or 6 dark suits, nothing but white shirts, and a bunch of ties. It was easy to get dressed. All right, so what makes for a good career? There's things you like to do. There's things you're good at. And every once in a while, we find a place where those intersect, where the things that we're good at, we also like to do. I think those make the best candidates for a career, because a career is a long time. So why do something for a long, long time that you don't like to do, right? And the way I describe it is, so where they intersect become opportunities for careers. There's things that you like to do that you determine you're not good at. Not good at means not good at to make money at, or not good enough to make enough money to provide your means, right? I'm not saying you couldn't make some money, but so there's things you really like to do that you can't make a financial career out of, and so those become our hobbies. The opposite, things that we're really good at that we don't really like to do, well, those are talents that we have that we just kind of choose not to exploit, right? And so all of you probably have this combination, I'm sure, things you like to do, things you're good at. So seek those intersections. I mean, I even try to separate and ask myself those questions, or I did when I was kind of early in my career, and I was looking for those intersections. And I'll give you some of the tools that I used, or that some mentors helped me use to try and figure out where those intersections are, because sometimes we don't know, right? Some of you, if I ask you the what do you want to be when you grow up kind of thing, you're not sure yet. And so I want to tell you a story about when my girls were in junior high. If you think back to, I still call it junior high, I know they call it middle school, but when you go to middle school, as you're entering the 6th grade, I remember that the girls would each come back from kind of the registration that happens a month before school starts or whatever, and they had to decide on their electives. Dad, should I do band or choir or sports or cheerleading or theater, and there were 3 other choices, right? And my answer was always yes. And they said, no, I can only pick 2 of them. I said, I know, but you have 3 years in junior high, don't you? So you can almost do all of them across the 3 years. They're like, I can? But why would I want to do that? I said, and I gave them the things you like to do and things you're good at lecture. And how do you know if you're really good at sports versus band versus theater unless you try it? How do you know if you like it unless you try it? You're so young when you're in middle school, man, this is the chance to just try everything. And if you decide in your first year that you absolutely love basketball, okay, you could do basketball again, or maybe you join kind of a non-school team basketball so that you could also try band and choir that second year. So I was like, do it all. And I had similar philosophy in high school. To the extent possible, do it all. Because there's going to be a day where you're going to have to pick one thing, and you're going to do it 50 hours a week, and you better know or hope that it's something you like to do and something you're good at. So experiment in these younger years. Okay? So that's the way I thought about it with my girls. For myself, I've got kind of a similar analogy. It's back to IBM. It's my zig and zag story. So every year, so IBM was a huge company, right? Every year, every employee got a one-on-one with their second line manager, my manager's manager. In that case, it was my branch manager. So I reported to a sales manager reported to a branch manager, and I saw the branch manager all the time, but once a year, I got to sit with him for an hour. And it was all around professional development, and he was expected to be a career coach for me. Now, my branch manager changed over time, but there was one that when I was, I don't know, 23 years old, same as that photo, said some flavor of, Gordon, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, well, I'm not sure. He asked me enough questions. I said, well, 23 years old, not even knowing exactly what that, like sit on the board of directors, I don't even know where that came from, but like it seemed interesting to me that I'd like to run a company or sit on the board of directors of the company. So that's what I told him. His reaction was, oh, you mean you don't aspire to be the global senior vice president of sales for IBM? I said, no way. I have a computer science degree. I really didn't even want to be a sales rep. It's just IBM was only hiring salespeople when I graduated, so I decided to take this job. Turned out, hey, it's pretty fun. I kind of like it. I'm good at it, but no. I don't even want to be a first-line sales manager. He said, okay. So when you're ready for promotion, we shouldn't promote you to the thing that we do for those that are on the sales track. You would go from a branch office to the regional staff to serve in a staff role, but sales related. And then you come back down to a branch as a first-line sales manager. Then you get promoted to a different staff position, a higher level staff position for a couple years. And then you come back as a branch manager. And this ping pong between staff and line is what happens at IBM until eventually you have a vice president title and a senior vice president title and then a grand poobah title. I didn't want to do that. So what he said is, if you want to run a company or sit on the board, you kind of need to know how companies work. He said, you should zig and zag. He literally used those words. You should zig and zag. That's how you're going to learn. Along the way, you might decide that you fall in love with a different function, and that's the track you want to get on. But if you still decide you want to kind of run a company, then keep zigging and zagging. Like, cool. So that's what happened. While I was at IBM, when I got first promoted, I got promoted into a finance role. That was my zig. And then I left IBM, went to Compaq, moved into a marketing role. That was my zag. And then I came to work for a small company, in product management. That was a zig, and I just kept doing that until I found myself in leadership positions. And then there were times where I was a general manager or a COO where, I had multiple functions, and I benefited from the zigging and zagging I did up to that point while adding some more stuff into my perspective. So that was interesting. That's the kind of equivalent of my girls doing band and choir and theater and sports and cheerleading, right? That's my equivalent of that over time. The other part of my zig and zag story wasn't really planned, but I learned that it's become a good tool for me. It's the size of the company I work for. I started off at $75 billion IBM, went to work for $15 billion Compaq, went to work for a $100 million NASDAQ traded company in the video conferencing industry, and then a $5 million Israeli headquartered company that I ran, then a $0, and then you see the evolution there. So in addition to the functions that I worked in and got exposed to, I got exposed to how companies of different sizes work. So the zigging and zagging, it doesn't have to just be a function. It could be certain industries or different business models or company sizes. So there's multiple dimensions to that concept. So those two things helped me figure out along the way what I like to do and what I was good at. Make sense? So maybe translate that, to yourself, and you don't just have to take my methods, but some of you know you're in the lane you want to be in and you want to stay in that lane. You would have answered my branch manager, I want to be the executive vice president of global sales for IBM. Boom. Killer. No problem. For those of you that aren't sure, you might zig and zag a little. So then over time, my zig and zag story gave me some valuable tools. 3 times I've been the president or president and COO. 3 times I've been the strategy officer for a company. I really benefited from my exposure to the different functions. I'd have a vice president of marketing that worked for me, that reported to me. Oh, I did her role. I was in her role for multiple times. You see, I was a 3-time chief marketing officer. You know, I had a sales VP reporting to me. Oh, yep, I did his role too. So I did their roles or close to it, and it advantaged me when I was a president or a strategy officer. What about my Capital Factory role? So I stand here after my kind of traditional career. I know I don't look at this as a job. I don't tell people I have a job because I don't know what phase of my life I'm in exactly, but it's not quite a job, but it's not a hobby either because I work a lot. But look at what I do at Capital Factory. It's not my title, but it's what I do. I advise startups, I educate them, I invest in companies, I sit on 4 boards of directors, I stand up and deliver Founders Academy. My zigging and zagging dramatically benefited me from that. When I sit on a panel, I don't freak out a whole lot about a question I might get asked because there's an increased likelihood it intersects with something that I did in the past, and I might have something to say about it. Okay? Questions on that? Yeah.
I mean, this is kind of an arbitrary question, but like, was there a time length that you saw for yourself, like when zigging and zagging? Was it opportunistic? Was it like, all right, now I'm looking for a new role to try something else?
So the question was like, did I put time frames on this? Like, how long should I be in a zig before I zag, and vice versa, and things like that. And I'm saying that for the benefit of the Dallas crew as well. I didn't quite think of it that way. It was more of a metaphor for me, and I was more opportunistic at it. It wasn't my next job. I am definitely going to move into marketing. It wasn't quite like that. It's like as opportunities present themselves, because there's other criteria. It wasn't just go get a marketing job. Like there was a lot of other stuff I was looking for. The other thing you need to know about me to apply as a backdrop, any of you that have read the book Strengths Finder will understand what I'm about to describe. If you haven't read the book, it's a book you read, it's a very quick read, and then you take an online assessment, and it reveals back to you your strengths. And it ranks all 35 of them. When I read the book, they only revealed your top 5. And strengths are inherent traits that you can't really change. It's like your personality. You can kind of fake it, but you can't really change your personality over short periods of time. Strengths aren't skills. They're things you have, and they can't really be developed too much. My number 1 strength is learner. So I actually, the zigging and zagging played to my strength. When I felt like I had semi-mastered something, I'd kind of lose interest in it and want to totally hit the plunger, hit the big red button, and jump into something I hadn't done before. So you need to know that about my personality. You might not have that appetite for learning. So this actually played very well into that, and I didn't know that for a long time. I didn't set timelines on these things. I just kind of let it organically happen. But I guess another way to say it, I embraced it rather than being afraid of it. Like, if I had been in a similar role, like, I've never done that before. No, branch manager said I should zig and zag. That's what I'm supposed to do if I really want. Okay, let's go do that. Yeah, good question.
Gordon, I've got a quick question.
Yes, sir.
What were your salary expectations with zigging and zagging into different industries and different companies? And do you kind of keep maintaining a ladder approach to salary each time, compensation?
Question around salary and expectations as I progressed. I mean, you know, regardless of zigging and zagging, yeah, for me, I was a ladder climber, and you know, I graduated college in December '86. So if you know about the '80s was, I mean, it was kind of that. A lot of us were capitalist ladder climbers, and I subscribed to that greatly. So. We'll talk a little bit about work-life balance, you know, but that wasn't me. So I was trying to aggressively climb both management ladder and earnings ladder, but that was me. So with each of those, yes, I was looking for that. So since we're talking about climbing the ladder, you know, this is not for everybody. Like, don't do what I did just because I'm given some ways to think about it. There are many roles that don't ever evolve into management, even managing a single employee, yet can make a lot of money and have significant impact on the company. You should see some people that I've worked with that were individual contributors that made as much money as senior vice presidents and contributed a ton. Okay? Even at a Fortune 500, I was a senior vice president at a Fortune 500, and there was a role, I can't remember what it was called, it might have been fellow or something like this. IBM has it, if you know IBM fellows. They make what senior vice presidents make, and they don't have anybody reporting to them. So you don't have to climb the ladder in that sense. You don't even have to aspire to make a couple $100,000 a year. I don't think that's what's important. That is a very individual thing. Okay, so I just want to give that disclaimer. The path that I took and the fact that I was a ladder climber doesn't mean you should. So for kind of getting yourself on some path as you see it, I recommend a couple of things. And one is just basics of goal setting. Rather than kind of randomly meandering as life and career presents itself to you, set some goals. I like starting with personal goals. I subscribe to the we work to live, we don't live to work. So if we work to live, then it means our ultimate goals are our personal goals. And you might think midterm, long-term, and then retirement. If retirement is more than 20 years away from you, then midterm might be 10 years, and long-term might be 20, and retirement might be retirement, right? If you're older, then those times might be compressed, or long-term for you might be retirement. But start with the personal goals. Look in the crystal ball. Imagine a day in the life of you 20 years from now and retirement from now. What do you see, you know? And with that, then how can your career best help you accomplish that? A lot of times it's the accumulation of, you know, some wealth that we can set aside that help us for that retirement. If you're one that doesn't believe you're going to live off of Social Security, then probably you need some of that to accomplish at least the retirement part. But there's other parts of what you might see along that journey where financial means will be important. But maybe there's some skills and things you also want to develop along the way that are an important part of your personal goals. And then you can put some milestone objectives onto your career side of things, your job and career, at certain increments to know, am I tracking? You know, am I on the right path to get there? I'll give you some examples. But I like starting with personal goals, then mapping to your career with milestone objectives within your career. So to give you an example, well, let me a couple more tips and I'll give you an example. Write them down. They're just, if a goal is in your head, it's not as safe and secure as just writing it on a piece of paper, putting it in a filed folder and in your desk in your home office. You want to get even more committed to your goals. Tell your manager, or maybe their manager too, to the extent your manager or your manager's manager know what your midterm and long-term goals are. Well, hey, couldn't that be helpful? I think so. Tell someone you love or trust, because when you do that, it memorializes it even more. The manager you have today is not the manager you're going to have 2 years from now or 3 years from now for sure. So the benefit of your manager knowing your mid-range and long-term goals is somewhat short-lived in the grand scheme of things. But that person that you love and trust, your best friend from college or your cousin that you're really super bonded with, saying, hey, I want to tell you my mid-range and long-term personal and career goals because I want you to kind of hold me accountable a little bit. I want to, by telling somebody, I'll do it. I used to do this a lot in competitive sports. I'm a competitive swimmer, and the best way to drive me, because I don't work out with a team, I work out on my own. So I go to swim workouts on my own, which takes a certain level of discipline. But what I'll do is I'll tell my girls and my wife and a couple other people, I'm going to qualify for the national championships in 3 events this year, and I'm going to come back with a top 10 finish. And I will say that because by saying that, this is the way I work, this is the way I tick. By saying that to them, now I have to go get it done because I don't want to miss that. And it's not that my kids are going to feel like I'm a total failure if I only qualify for 2 events and I don't finish top time, but that's the way that I do it. So by writing them down, telling a manager, and telling someone else that you love or trust, some of you might find that it helps commit yourself to it, okay? And then track your progress against those over time. These are the same things we do in business. We're just applying it to our personal career. And then revise as needed. You might have been overly aggressive. You might not have been aggressive enough. Make sense? The concept's not hard. The discipline to actually do this is what's harder, and the discipline to kind of stay up with it. So I'm going to, I'm trying to make myself vulnerable and just give you some examples from myself here. And so these are my original personal goals from 1989. I didn't do this in '87 when I started my career at IBM. It came to me a couple years later, probably around that zig and zag conversation, or maybe I read a book. So back then, just so you know, I'm not lying, these are the two pieces of paper from 1989 with my career goals and my personal goals. And I'm sharing with you a majority of the personal goals. I had a goal of semi-retiring by age 58. To me, that meant I'd work because I want to, not because I need to. Along the way, I can't remember how old I was, but I revised it to 53. I made it more aggressive. And as it turned out, I accomplished it when I was 48. So it's okay to make them, more aggressive. It's also okay to go the other way, right? I decided I wanted to travel the world, maintain good health and stay in shape, build a custom home. Don't know why that was on there. It seemed interesting to me at the age of 23. And then write a book. So I've accomplished all of those. I'm trying to continue to stay healthy and in shape. And I'm writing a book right now. So I'm 53 years old, and I'm still working on one of my long-term goals. I'm just now writing my book. But I wrote those down in 1989. And then every year, for about 15 years, I kind of dropped off a little bit. Every year, I would make yearly goals. Right here, if you were looking at, you see the year, and I had 4 or 5 goals every year. I'd check them off. Oop, missed that one. There's about 3 or 4 years on each page. So I'm just giving you an example. Like, it's not that hard. So I have current goals. So I stand in front of you with gray hair and have accomplished a decent amount, but I still have goals. One of my goals is to take a two-week anniversary vacation somewhere in the world with my wife, somewhere that we both have never seen and really, really want to see. So we've started that tradition. We're going to Ireland this year, okay, on our anniversary. Double the size of our beach house so that all of our kids and grandkids can be with us at the same time. That's important to me and my wife now. That wasn't even in the picture 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Set aside some extra money. I have a certain amount in mind to help support post-high school education for our grandkids if our girls need our help. For all I know, it's going to cost $500,000 to send my granddaughters to college, and I want to be able to help with that if it's important. Set aside a certain amount of money for possible expensive medical conditions for family members. Something drastic were to happen to one of my girls or son-in-laws or daughters, I want to be in a position to help. So those are some of my current goals, just so you know, like this exercise, once you become a goal setter, it never ends. Doesn't matter how old you are or how successful you become. Okay, make sense? Questions on that? Okay. Here's a tool that I used and that I really, really suggest. I just suggested this to someone that I had lunch with, that I'm a career mentor for. Just updating your resume is an exercise that will help you determine, are you advancing in directions towards mid-range and long-term career goals. Usually, we don't update our resume until we're ready to leave the company we're working for and go somewhere else. And we scratch our heads and we think back, God, what have I done over the last 2 years, 3 years, 4 years that's worthy of, how do I write this section? Why wait until you're ready to leave a company and go somewhere else to figure out what you accomplished? And so when I was in my 20s, I would update my resume every 6 months, even though I loved working for IBM. I wasn't even thinking about leaving. I just wanted to know, am I advancing towards my mid-range and long-range career goals? And one exercise was, well, wait, isn't that reflected on our resume? What have you accomplished? Because in your resume, you can't just keep adding more and more bullets. Like, you can't have like 15 bullets for your current job. You want 3 or 4 or 5. And they're the best 3 or 4 or 5. The most significant things you've accomplished in 3 or 4 or 5 bullets. So the way I thought about this is, what have I accomplished in the last 6 months that is more significant than one of these 3 or 4 or 5 bullets, so that I'm going to pull one of them off and replace it with this one because it's better? And so I would kind of do this every 6 months. And then there was a period where, damn, I didn't accomplish anything in the last 6 months that's more significant than those. Okay, it's not catastrophic. I've been building it over time, But what do I want to write there in 6 months? What would be more significant to put there? You know, if I could say that, that would be badass. I would pull that off and I'd put that on. Well, good. Now I know what I'm going to go accomplish in the next 6 months. And it's things that were in line with my career goals. Double benefit, right? And then when I was in my 30s, I dropped that back to about every year. I just kind of found that the pace of accomplishments and other things. So I find kind of general rule of thumb that I recommend is when you're in 20s, do it every 6 months. Whether you're looking for a job or not, when you're in 30s, do it every year. Keep doing it after that if it's a good tool for you. All right, I mentioned these things. It's okay to seek feedback from your managers. Managers should proactively do it, but we don't as much as we should. It's okay to ask them, because remember, if your manager knows what your mid-range career goals are, you can ask them, is there anything I should be doing to put myself in the best chance of meeting my professional goals? And then more specific on projects and programs and activities, how could I have achieved even better results with the Texas Startup Roadshow, with the Last Accelerator Cycle, with the blank event, with the, right? So I think those are good questions to help your manager also be a career coach to you. Make sense? Questions? All right. Now the topic of work-life balance, the fun one. This is a tough one because, you know, on the work side we have a lot of stuff. You see over here, you know, your duties at work and your pursuit of these goals that we're talking about now and developing skills. We have relationships at work. That's the professional network that we develop. Different than, usually, the relationships we have on the life side. So we have relationships. Maybe having social impact is important, or staying healthy. Spiritual balance is important to a lot. Education. You also have chores and things, right? So there's also hobbies over here. This is hard to keep in balance, isn't it? You know, trying to balance this way, the work versus the life part. I find, like, if you had a piece of paper like that and just kind of put it in a folder, and every 90 days had a reminder on your calendar, look at work-life balance chart. I had something kind of like this. It wasn't written in this format that I would use with my daughters, especially kind of as they got into college and whatnot, because there's semblances of this when the work is your studies and your life is your life. So, you know, studies, you know, high school, college, graduate, whatever, is analogous. And so I had this diagram, and I'd say your system, your work life is out of balance. Here, just look at this. Like, oh shit, you know what? I haven't been to church in 4 months, you know, and I haven't done my volunteer activity at the whatever. Like, okay, yeah, it can kind of, something will jump off the page. You realize you haven't been giving some attention to, and just that awareness can be helpful. I'm definitely better at this than I used to be. I'm very, very guilty of being way out of balance in the past. There was a 6-year period where I flew 250,000 miles a year. It was almost all international. I was running an Israeli tech company, so I was all over the place. I now have on American Airlines, you see there, 2.5 million miles that I racked up over on American. So for those 6 years, because of that, it was work balance. It was work balance. And I didn't realize it until we sold the company, and I jumped off that hamster wheel and decided I was going to take up to a year off. Very quickly I realized, holy crap, like, I was unhealthy, not spending near enough time with my young girls, all the stuff on the right side of that chart, all the hobbies that I had, like, nope. So it really helped me realize I'm not letting that happen again, you know. And then another part of this work-life balance that a lot of people don't think about is balancing that way too. And even just more on the right side of the chart, right? It's easy to really get jammed up on one or two. All of these might not be important to all of you, like these are candidates, but I like to sometimes think about balancing within the left side, balancing within the right side. Like on the left side, the balance, we could just be going after all our duties and not putting much effort into our own personal skills development and pursuit of our goals, right? Yeah, so think about that. So here's some ways I attempted to stay balanced. You know, when I was young, I was in a hard rock band. That's me shooting skeet. That's me. I used to scuba dive about every month out in the Gulf of Mexico. I was a competitive pool player for about 10 years, and I'm a competitive swimmer. And then now a lot of my balance happens because of this beach house that we got that's a retreat for me and my family. So I just want to give you examples of, I work a lot here at Capital Factory, but I still do, you know, some of those things. So it kind of never ends. In fact, your definition of work-life balance, it'll change over time. Like the things that mean balance to you. For example, 3.5 years ago, I didn't have Olivia, my granddaughter, and a week and a half ago, I didn't have Harper, my other granddaughter. They're now an important part of my work-life balance. I wasn't thinking that way in the not-so-distant past. So your definition of balance will change over time. Make sense? Questions? Okay. So some possible homework assignments in this part about your professional career. Think about the like versus good at thing. Maybe stare at a work-life balance. Stare at that work-life balance. I'd be happy to share that particular slide if it's a good cheat sheet for anyone. Think about goals. Communicate those goals to some people that will semi-hold you accountable for that, or maybe help you feel accountable to them. And then think about the resume update exercise. Those are some ideas. I'm not really giving you a homework exercise. I just thought, like, okay, after all of that, what might be some takeaways, and what might you want to do? Okay, helpful? Questions before I move to the last piece? All right. Now, managing your financial career, because I think these are somewhat intertwined. If you're working to live, then accumulating some amount of financial support to support those things that are on the live part of that can be important. So I have to give a disclaimer. I have no certifications for what I'm about to talk about. This is just me totally as a layman and somebody that's made financial mistakes and had some financial successes too. So I have no certifications. So one actually kind of relates back to what we were talking about before in interaction with managers. There's a way to talk about, to have that pay raise discussion with your manager. It's a funky conversation, isn't it? It's like, managers don't like having it. You really don't like having it. It's like, but the way I appreciate it, this is the way I approached it myself. Probably somebody coached me and gave me this advice, but as a manager and an executive, this is the way I also like to have the discussion with employees, is to not make it about the upcoming pay raise or promotion or whatever. It's about the career. It's about the track you're on. What is it you're trying to aspire to? Where do you want to be in 3 to 5 years? And how could this next move, whether it's a compensation move or a expansion of your role or a title change, well, how does that put you on or keep you on that track? It takes it less out of the current thing, and it puts it in context of a career. When we make it just about the next one, that sounds like a job. Remember, a job is a paycheck? But a career is a longer term aspirational thing, and if your manager is supporting you on your career, I'm not saying it's going to give you a higher pay raise or anything. I'm not saying it's more likely that you'll get a pay raise or a title bump. I'm saying it puts it in context to have an easier conversation. Make sense? So try that. The second financial principle I want to mention is the 10% plus 10% piece. If we're trying to save up money so that we can retire and do things, this is the way I've always thought about it and what I've coached my daughters. If for your career you could set aside 10% for retirement and 10% for all the other stuff, all the non-retirement part, you're very likely to be in great shape. Okay? 10% to that, 10% to that. I realize that's 20%. I only make this much. I can't do that. Got it. I'll give you a tool for that too. Okay? But the 10% plus 10% rule, I think, can serve everybody unbelievably well. A lot of it has to do with the compounding effect of money. Money, when you invest it, it grows compounded. The $100 that next year is 105. Now it's 105 that's growing to 111, and so there becomes a day where your money really is working for you, and you see it. So the problem is it takes a while to get up to that number to where the money working for you, like, that's an interesting amount of money. That part of my nest egg went up by, I mean, imagine if your nest egg went up by $50,000 in a year. That's not bad. Imagine if it went up by 100 or 200,000 a year. That is your money working for you. So like, you know, you have to get it in. It starts slow. I mean, unless you might work for a startup and have an exit and put $500,000 in the bank and it immediately goes to work for you. But most of us have to start putting in small amounts and it grows over time. So I ran a quick example for you and I want you to see the impact of this. And the scenario is someone that starts earlier in their career is making $40,000 a year. They get 5% annual pay raises on average, and they invest it in a way that grows 5% annualized. You invest it somewhere that gives you a 5% return, okay? Early in your career, oftentimes you can do better, sometimes a lot better than 5%. There might be some 4 or 5% raises, and then there's a 10 or 12% raise. When you climb the ladder and you're up here, okay, 5% raises are a little bit harder to come by, right? Many of you will do better than 5% return in the stock market or wherever you decide to invest. You might do 6 or 7 or 8, right? So, but this is just the scenario that I ran. If you run that over a 40-year period, because maybe it's someone that's 25 and at 40 they're 65. So this is kind of a retirement horizon for someone that's maybe starting in their mid-20s. In the early days, the numbers don't look that different, but look as they start to diverge. What this is, the red line is putting away 4% of your earnings, not 4 plus 4, let's say this is the retirement half of that equation. 4% over 40 years, you'd accumulate a little more than $500,000. 7%, it'd be $942,000. 10%, it'd be $1.3 million. So if this 25-year-old at $40,000 salary and 5% annual raises and a 5% growth on their investments could put away 10%, they'd have $1.3 million when they're 65. Not too bad. And a hell of a lot better than the 538. I mean, 538 is not anything to sneeze at, but I'd rather have that extra $800,000. So if I could get to that 10% instead of the 4%, and imagine we do this on the other side too. Remember, it was 10% plus 10%? Now I got $1.3 million in retirement, and I got $1.3 million in my investment account that I can go buy that beach house, and I can go on those 2-week annual vacations with spouse and that stuff, right? Look at the penalty for starting late. Like, yeah, I'm not making that much money. This is my youngest daughter, right? She's first job. She's 1.5 years into it. She's not making a lot of money. She's making, entry job salary. Dad, I can't put away 10%. Yeah, I get it. She said, I'll maybe 5 or 10 years from now, I'll start that thing. Look at what happens when you delay this by 10 years. You slide the whole graph to the right by 10 years. So if my daughter does that, when she's 65, she'll have $248,000 if she sets aside 4%, or $620,000 if she sets aside 10%. Sliding this by 10 years, $600,000 versus $1.3 million, I'd rather get started early. That's the big lesson on this thing, is get started early and let that start compounding. Don't freak out when at the end of the year it only has $285, because the next year it's going to have $675, and it's going to have $1,800, and then a few years later it's going to have $18,000, and one day it's going to have $100, then it's going to have $250, blah, blah, blah. But it's the don't start because you don't think it's going to make a difference that can kill you. Make sense? Questions on that? Okay, and I want to teach y'all, if you don't, some of y'all already learned this, but the rule of 72, money doubles based on this rule of 72 without adding more money to it. So you inherit $10,000 from your grandmother and you set it aside, okay? That money will double using this compound growth rate times number of years equals 72 formula. So that $10,000 will double in 18 years if you invest it at 4%. If it returns 4% per year, but only 9 years if you can get 8% on that money. So if you want to, I like sometimes thinking about money doubling or quadrupling, and I just use the rule of 72. Interest rate times number of years that equals 72, that's the combo that your money will double, without adding anything else to it. If you add to it, of course, it's going to do a lot better. My previous example, remember, we were adding to it every month. But there becomes a day where you don't have to add to it. It just doubles like that. And if I'm smart enough to, if you accumulate, $500,000 and then don't add any more to it because you want to, use it for something else, if you could invest at 6 years, it's going to double, or at 6%, it'll double 12 years later. Okay? Does that make sense? Good rule to know. Other thing is, unfortunately, 1.3 million looked like a lot of money, but 40 years is a long way away, and there's this thing called inflation. And 1.3 million isn't going to feel like 1.3 million 40 years from now. In fact, 40 years from now, at just 2.5% inflation rate, it'll feel like 368,000 in today's dollars. And, if right now I told you you'll have 368,000, quote, today's dollars in your retirement account, you probably aren't jumping up and down and going, yeah, got my retirement nailed. Because hopefully you're going to live a lot longer than 65, and 368,000 divided by however many years probably doesn't work very well. So I don't know what your magic number is going to be, but it's a way to think about it. I do encourage you to think about that dollar amount when you're 60, 70, whatever, and then do the backwards calculation to in today's dollars. Yep, that feels about right. And then where do you need to be along the way? So I had age 30, age 40, age 50 net worth goals because I knew where I wanted to be for retirement. I revised that, a couple of times, but that's the only way I knew to, when I was 30 years old, am I on track or not? Because the curve kind of goes like that. And then at 40, same thing. That's why I'm mentioning this. And the whole, why not wait till you're making more money and can afford to get started? Well, what about starting with like 2% plus 2%, or 2 plus 3, or 3 plus 3, like something in the 2 to 3%, maybe that's palatable. Even 1% plus 1%. The main mission is to just do anything, because if you'll do anything in these two buckets, with each pay raise, bump it up a little bit. So my daughters, as soon as they signed on with companies that had 401k plans, like put 2% for sure, and then set an investment account and just automatic, payroll withdrawal of 2%. Next pay raise, depending on how big the pay raise, it was a 10% pay raise, why not add 1 plus 1? The other 8 goes to you, or 2 plus 2, the other 6 goes to you. So with each pay raise, nudge it up until you get to 10 plus 10. That's what I advise my daughters. They're still working their way towards that, but that's the way I think about it. Does that help? I talked about rainy days. That was on that right list, and unfortunately rainy days happen. This has happened to all of you, I'm sure, but part of the reason to kind of have something set aside under the mattress that you can get your hands on, those pesky expensive car repairs, some medical emergency that you didn't think about, and even though you got a benefits plan, it was one of those, yikes, it required surgery, and I had to write a $5,000 check to the hospital, or you're out of a job for a couple of months. That's the way I think about the rainy day syndrome. And as those of you that move into management, and especially executive management, if you're a VP of blah, I'd recommend that you have 4 months of job search, because a lot of those jobs aren't advertised and you don't find them within a month or two. It can take a while. Okay, so it depends on your level in the organization and the time frame it might take to get a job. Okay. If children enter the picture, there's another part of financial career that I usually advise, and I know some of you have kids, some of you are going to have kids soon. Life insurance. It's the what would happen if kind of thing. And there's a component of life insurance, sometimes it's a separate policy called AD&D. It's the last D in that, the dismemberment, or it's the disability where, I hate to say it, but you lose a limb or something like that. Life insurance isn't going to pay. You didn't die, but you no longer have certain functions in your body or capabilities, and you can't either get a job or can't get a job that pays you what you need. And that's the kind of insurance. It's dirt cheap, or tacked on with a life insurance policy, it's dirt cheap. But for me, when I had kids, it was help me sleep at night kind of thing. Same with the long-term disability insurance. Something to think about, especially when kids enter the picture. So some possible homework assignments. Think about those 2 investment accounts. Think about starting with anything small. Think about advancing that. The fact that we don't have a 401k plan shouldn't stop you. A Fidelity or similar IRA account, a Roth IRA. Most of you qualify for a Roth IRA. They're badass. And you can do a payroll deduction straight into that account. $50 a month, whatever you think you can afford. It'll get it started. And then there will be a day that we have a 401k plan, and we can just, with the same thing, we'll just withdraw it and put it into that. You might go to work for a company that has one. You might go to work for a company that has a matching program. So if you put 4%, they'll tack on another 4. Hey, that's badass, because you're trying to get to 10. 5 from you and 5 from the company. That's pretty cool. So that's the way to think about that. Think about that rainy day fund, you know, the what if. And then if you have kids especially, you know, think about the life insurance and go educate yourself on that. There's many different types of life insurance. You definitely want to research it. You want to educate yourself and talk to some others about it. Okay? That's all I got. All right, helpful, a couple tidbits. I hope everybody, I mean, my goal, just like with Founders Academy, is to deliver at least 2 aha moments and at least a couple things that you wrote down that like, I want to think about this more, I want to read about this, or I want to do this. So if each of you have 2 aha moments and 2 things you want to go do, then I accomplished my personal objective. Hey, Kevin.
What's the book about?
The book? The book I'm writing, it is a book on early stage startup fundraising. I've got a 3-book series that I'm writing. The second, it might only be 2 volumes, but yeah. I'm taking all the articles that I've written, grouped them, filling in gaps, working with an editor. So the first one is on early stage startup fundraising. Yeah?
How would you factor in like equity from startups as part of your retirement?
Question is how to factor in equity from startups into retirement. I'll tell you how I do it myself. Like any investment, we think in portfolio. And especially after you've got, I don't know how much, but some amount, enough amount that your investment advisor is suggesting that you put some of it in kind of safe, conservative, some in moderately aggressive, some in international or emerging markets. What they're doing is they're diversifying, right? So that if the U.S. economy goes like this, but the rest of the world is fine, okay, this part of your portfolio is going down, this one's holding on okay. So we naturally, over time, as we accumulate enough, an advisor is going to suggest that we diversify. I see my early stage angel investments as that. I see, as a part of my portfolio that is a very, very high risk, the highest risk investment class that I have are my angel investments. And I kind of think about, therefore, my equity that I have in startups, not from investing, but from advising or serving on a board of directors in the same way. Even though I'm not investing money to get that equity, I'm investing my time. And I have alternatives with what to do with my time. In that time that I spend advising startups to get that equity, I could maybe do some part-time consulting on the side and get paid cash, right? So my angel investments and my startup equity from advising and board assignments, I treat as the riskiest asset class within my total portfolio. And I have talked to my financial advisor multiple times. He doesn't see that because it's not in the account that he's looking at, but he knows how much it is. And we talk about the percent of my total portfolio that is in that. Yeah. And that's because a lot of it's going to go to zero. And, you know, 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 20 might hit big. Over the last 19 years, I've probably gained equity in 30 companies. One of them IPO'd at a $200 million valuation. 5 or 6 of them have crashed and burned. The others are just like our portfolio. There's a handful that are struggling, handful I'm feeling pretty good about. You know, it's that kind of thing. Yeah, that's the way I think about it. Does that help?
Yeah, thanks.
Anything else? Yeah.
Oh.
Go ahead, Tyler.
So your next one is July 10th. It's a Wednesday, and it's Fundraising 101. What sort of stuff can we expect from that one?
Fundraising 101 is another one we have on the books. I'll take input. So like if anybody, the idea is to give you guys a peek into startup fundraising. And you know, I was going to use maybe some of my Founders Academy content for what advice do I give startups to figure out how much money to raise and why is that the right amount. Maybe teach a little bit about fundraising instruments that we use, a little bit about pitching investors. So it's kind of a peek under the covers to what it's like to raise an early round of funding. But I'm open. Like if you guys want to send me or Tyler some feedback on fundraising 101, is there anything in particular y'all be interested in? I'll tailor it to that. Yeah. What else? There was one. Yeah.
Yeah. No, mentorship. I'm just kind of curious how you approach that, like from looking and seeking out mentors. From your perspective, was it organic? Did you kind of be like, hey, like, would you be open to this?
Yeah.
I mean, that's just a big part of Capital Factory. So, like, how did you approach that in your personal career?
Great. It's a great question. It's mentorship, professional career, financial career. Yeah. How do those mentor relationships develop? I think there's possibly a reactive component and a proactive component to it. There are some managers or executives I worked for that were natural mentors. It's just the way they are. And because of that, I modeled myself a lot. My management style, my executive style naturally inherits or adopts a lot of, I expect of myself to be a mentor, okay? But that's not always the case. And so you might find yourself working for one of those types, or there might be a peer manager to your manager that you can tell is like that, or you've heard about it. And maybe just, could I buy you coffee? Would love to pick your brain. So that's the proactive part of it. So if it's not happening organically, and I think if you identify someone you think could be, then it's just, hey, for the cost of some coffee every once in a while, you get some advice. And if there's kind of that twinkle in each other's eye, not in a loving sort of way, but in a respectful kind of like, hey, that person enjoys giving the advice and you enjoy the way it's being delivered, then hey, would you mind, like, could we do this once a quarter? Like if I buy the coffee, would you, or something like that. I don't think, if they don't have the time, they'll let you know, but I think most that are natural in that way would respond. And this is over a long period of time. I definitely am thinking about probably a half a dozen people that I considered mentors, and some of those mentors actually were my peers. Like I was a senior vice president of blah blah blah. They were senior vice president of some other blah blah blah. But there was things about them that I knew I could learn from in this kind of similar context. So a mentor does not have to be a superior. Just someone that you think you can learn from, and yeah.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, Arich?
Yeah, so I have a question about this. It's going back to your experimentation and the zig and the zag and all that. So it's whenever there's a staff member in their 20s that's basically zig and zag on steroids, and they realize that they kind of like their job, but they really want to try this or try this or try this, but they're not qualified to do so. And so that's a really big hindrance for some people to actually go and explore outside of what their current responsibilities are. So what's your advice for those people that are scared to venture outside of their little bubble?
Yeah, so the zigging and zagging, you might want to zig in a particular area, but you've never done it. And like if this is career and like you're literally going to go look for a job, or it's a role here in Capital Factory that you'd like to zig to, but you've never done anything kind of like it, well, yeah, it's because it's not easy, right? Why would they hire you if you've never done whatever? When you're early in your career, and they're looking for more entry level, it's easier because they're not finding people with a whole lot of experience in any particular discipline. So they're looking at raw talent and things like that. As you move a little bit and there's certain salary expectations, that job posting says must have been a marketing manager for 5 years or more. Like, I want to zig into marketing and I'm already at this level and I don't want to go all the way down to the beginning again, right? So yeah, I understand the issue. Sometimes there are adjacencies that are on the way there. Mine were somewhat extreme, and it was, a lot of it was timing and luck, and so you just that has to play into it. I went from sales into marketing. I never even took a single marketing class in college, right? I have a computer science degree. Compaq hired me to run product marketing for the server division for North America for a $2.5 billion chunk of the company. Why? They were hiring people from IBM and HP that knew big enterprise, that knew how enterprise companies thought. The fact that I carried a $9 million quota selling into big enterprise and knew that world is what qualified me in Compaq's eyes they figured they can teach me the marketing stuff. They even had specialists assigned to me. It was more important the expertise I had in something else. So sometimes a zig or a zag, you've got something as a building block that becomes, you know, the justification for you in that role, and you need to learn the rest very quickly. Other times, if I want to zig here, there might be a baby step or a step along the way before I can go there. And maybe there's supplemental ways to kind of gain some of that knowledge without a job. There's ways of helping out a startup in a certain area and learning that, some online courses. It's not easy, and the severity of the zigging and zagging, that might not really be possible. It might be a little more subtle like that. Yeah. All right, I want to be respectful of your time. If you have more questions for me on any of this stuff, I'm happy to help. See you next time.
Thank you, Gordon.
You're welcome.
Yeah, Gordon, are we going to share the slides if someone wants to?
I can. Help me figure out who to send them to, and yeah.
A lot of people are saying yes.
Okay. Tyler, can you email me and ask me for them?
Yeah.
I might pull out a couple of my personal ones with my photos and stuff and then just save it as a PDF. So. Yeah, I know you want that photo of me playing the guitar, don't you?
Hi.
Hi.
I just wanted to introduce myself and say thank you.
Yeah.
That was really awesome.